I'm Dr. Lena Popovic, and after 30 plus years in medical practice, I realise there's a lot missing from modern medicine. Education is more powerful than medication, and our decisions have more impact than our DNA. Today's brain booster is skip the sugary sip, because every soft drink is a bullet to your brain. I know when you crack open a can of soda or polish off an energy drink, you probably get a temporary buzz. Why wouldn't you? There's fizz, sweetness, caffeine, and whatever other stimulant has been added to the coloured chemical concoction you're consuming. But you're also loading your body and brain with a cocktail of excess sugar, a surge in insulin, inflammation, and metabolic stress. And what is metabolic stress? Metabolic stress in the brain is a state in which the brain's use of glucose is disrupted. That means there's going to be a deficit to your brain's energy supply, so your brain won't be working at full capacity. There's also going to be a buildup of damaging byproducts that lead to cells malfunctioning, and over the long term, these processes increase the risk of cognitive decline, brain shrinkage, and Alzheimer's. In other words, fizzy drinks cause fuzzy brains. A landmark study from what's known as the Framingham Heart Study, FHS, found that people who regularly consumed sugary drinks, and that included soft drinks, energy drinks, which are even worse, sweetened fruit beverages, and fruit juices, had similar overall brain volumes and smaller hippocampi being the plural of hippocampus, which is a part of our brain that's crucial for memory. And sure enough, when tested, people who consumed more sugary beverages scored worse on tests of episodic memory, which is the ability to remember recent or past events, such as where you parked your car this morning or how you celebrated your birthday last month. And worsening episodic memory is a hallmark of early cognitive decline and a risk factor for dementia. What's even more alarming, for people drinking 1 to 2 sugary drinks a day, small ones, the loss in brain volume was equivalent to about 5.8 years of brain aging. In other words, if you consume 1 or 2 soft drinks a day, your brain will look and function as though it were 6 years older than someone who rarely or never drinks soft drinks. And drinking more than 2 sugary beverages a day led to 11 years of brain aging. And the longer you continue drinking sugary beverages, the more your brain will continue to age at a faster rate than someone who doesn't drink soft drinks. And what I find ironic about all this is that we live in a society that's absolutely obsessed with buying the latest, greatest, costly anti-aging products. We're hooked on pills, powders, potions, lotions that have no proven benefit in preventing aging. And here we have the most potent and cost-free, in fact cost-saving way to slow down aging staring us in the face. Quit the Coke, pour out the Pepsi, forgo the Fanta, spurn the Sprite, cut out the cordial, jettison the juice, and renounce Red Bull. You'll be amazed at how much better you feel, how much better you sleep, how much more clearly you think, and how much more energy you have. Because as I mentioned in my first podcast episode, the faster your brain is aging, the faster your body is aging. Now, you might be thinking, but that's only the findings of one study. Valid consideration. But I have news for you. There are hundreds of studies that reveal the harms of soft drinks at all ages and stages of life. A large review of US adults aged 60 years and older found that increased consumption of carbonated soft drinks, sweetened tea, fruit drinks, energy drinks, and sports drinks were all significantly linked to worsening cognitive function. And I'll list all the studies I mentioned plus others in the show notes. An investigation of more than 177,000 UK residents, followed for an average of 9.5 years, found that those who drank 2 or more soft drinks a day had a significantly high risk of developing dementia, And this held true, wait for it, whether or not they carried genes that increased their risk of dementia. So having good genes does not protect you from dementia if you drink sugary beverages. Wow. I could go on and on, but you get the message. Hundreds of research papers have all revealed the same thing. The more you drink, the more you shrink your brain and its ability to function properly. But how do sugary drinks cause so much havoc in our brain and body? When you drink a sugar-sweetened beverage, a big dose of sugar is dumped into your blood. And before we go on, we have to take a brief look at the structure of a sugar molecule. Sugar is a type of carbohydrate. Think of sugar as a brick and carbohydrate as a wall. All carbohydrates, walls, are made by joining different sugars, bricks, in various combinations. And walls, like carbohydrates, come in different shapes and sizes. So picture a wall, the carbohydrate, made up of bricks, the sugars. And the type and number of sugars, i.e. the type of bricks, and the number of bricks that make up a carbohydrate determine how the carbohydrate is handled by our body. Now, bricks differ obviously by their strength, durability, capacity to absorb water, appearance, longevity. So you can get lots of different types of bricks, as you can lots of different types of sugars. And when I say how a carbohydrate is handled by our body, I mean how the carb is broken down and either used for energy or stored as fat. Yes, we do convert sugar into fat. And there are a lot of steps and enzymes and hormones involved in converting a carb into energy or fat. So let's see what happens to the sugar in soft drinks. And I think this is really important because otherwise you're just not going to be convinced that they are as harmful as they really are. So the sugar used to make soft drinks is either sucrose, which is just ordinary table sugar, the white stuff you add to tea or coffee, or hopefully don't add. Or in North and South America, soft drinks often contain a sugar called high fructose corn syrup, or HFCS. Now, high fructose corn syrup is a highly processed man-made sugar not found in nature, and it requires a lot of industrial modification of corn, whereas sucrose is extracted and refined from sugarcane or sugar beets. So although they're manufactured very differently, the fate of sugar and HFCS in our body is pretty much the same. They're both equally damaging, so I'm just going to talk about them as one and the same thing. Okay, so sucrose and HFCS both consist of one sugar brick called glucose, combined with a slightly different sugar brick called fructose. And although glucose and fructose have a similar chemical structure, the way our body handles them is very, very different. So let's start with fructose. Fructose, you're probably aware, is frequently referred to as fruit sugar because it's found in a lot of fruits. And when fructose is part of a fruit, it comes with fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And fiber in fruit significantly slows fructose absorption compared to when fructose comes naked in a drink, because the fiber forms a physical barrier, so it slows stomach emptying. And as well as that, our body has to break down plant cell walls to release the sugar, to release the fructose, which means we absorb less of the sugar contained in a fruit compared to the sugar contained in a drink. So there's both less of a rise in blood sugar and a slower rise in blood sugar. In contrast, the sugar in a soft drink has no fiber, which means it's absorbed very quickly, the total amount of sugar in the drink is absorbed, and it causes a dramatic spike in blood levels of fructose, glucose, and insulin. Also, the vitamin C in fruit mitigates some of the harms of fructose because vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant, and it reduces what is known as mitochondrial oxidative stress, which results from fructose breakdown. Let me explain what that jumble of words means, because they're really important concepts that relate to every aspect of our health and to the process of aging. And you'll hear me talk about mitochondria and oxidative stress in future podcasts. So I'm going to lay the groundwork now. A mitochondrion, plural mitochondria, are organelles inside our cells. And an organelle is a specialized structure that has a specific job. Think of it like this. An organelle is to a cell what an organ is to our body. So examples of organs are the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys. Examples of organelles are a cell's nucleus, which stores genetic information, ribosomes, which assemble proteins, and mitochondria, which are nicknamed the powerhouses of a cell because they use oxygen and nutrients from the food we eat, i.e., glucose and fats, to create energy in the form of a molecule called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. Now, I know that's a lot of biochemistry, but it will re-emerge and resurface and come up again podcast after podcast. So I'm going to drip feed you biochemistry as we go so that you start to get a really good grasp of it. And by the way, mitochondria do more than just generate energy, but for now, just think of them as a cell's battery. So mitochondria create energy for cells so that you could walk, talk, think, blink, digest food, and do whatever you need to do that requires energy. And different cells contain different numbers of mitochondria depending on how much energy they need to carry out their functions. So it will come as no surprise that muscles and brain cells contain thousands of mitochondria, while skin cells contain only a few hundreds of mitochondria. Why? Because the energy demands of our brain and muscles are much higher than the energy demands of our skin. And just for completeness, mature red blood cells generate energy differently to other cells in our body, so they don't contain any mitochondria at all, but all other cells do. That's why they're so important. And as such, mitochondria produce about 90% of all our energy, i.e. 90% of the energy that our body needs to function is produced by mitochondria. So they are really, really important. Because if you have a problem with your mitochondria, if they're damaged or malfunctioning, every cell in your body is going to be negatively affected to a greater or lesser degree. And as I said, I'm getting into the nitty-gritty of mitochondria because mitochondrial dysfunction lies at the heart of all the major chronic diseases we currently face. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, multiple sclerosis, lupus, SLE, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, which stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The list goes on. So mitochondria are going to keep coming up in future podcasts. Back to fructose. One of the many ways that fructose harms our brain is by causing mitochondrial dysfunction. So fructose throws a spanner in the production of energy. Fructose interferes with the generation of ATP. Remember, that's the molecule that provides cells with energy. And that leads to a drop in brain cell energy. And guess what happens when our brain is short of energy? We get brain fog. We don't think clearly. We become forgetful. We aren't firing on all cylinders. And that alone would be enough of a reason to avoid a flood of fructose into our brain, as occurs when we consume soft drinks and other sugary beverages. But alas, fructose does so much more. Fructose triggers inflammation. And it produces what are known as reactive oxygen species, abbreviated ROS. Now, ROS are also really important for you to understand. So, ROS are highly reactive, unstable molecules containing oxygen, which are good when they're present in small amounts, but not when they accumulate in large amounts, as they do when there's a lot of fructose around. Because a surplus of ROS causes serious damage to DNA, proteins, and cell membranes, which leads to accelerated aging, heart disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Fructose also causes brain insulin resistance, which is another route to Alzheimer's. Hence, Alzheimer's has been called type 3 diabetes of the brain. And fructose can change hundreds of genes in our brain, particularly in the hippocampus, our learning and memory center, and the hypothalamus, the region of our brain that regulates hormone production. That means fructose impairs memory and learning, and fructose disrupts hormone production. When rats are fed fructose, they fail to learn their way through a maze. Usually rats love mazes, and after a few goes, they get really good at speeding their way through. But if a rat is given fructose, it never manages to remember how to get out of a maze. Fructose, and this is also another big one, reduces our response to hormones that regulate our appetite. One of those hormones is leptin, and leptin tells us that we're full and don't need any more food. But fructose makes us leptin resistant, so we don't get the message that we're full and we just want to keep eating. To make matters worse, fructose dials up the reward signal we get from food, which leads to food cravings, and it dials down activity in our prefrontal cortex, which is the brain region responsible for self-control and decision-making. So guess what happens? We become more impulsive when it comes to eating and food choices. Have you ever blamed yourself for having no willpower when it comes to snacking on junk? Blame fructose. Skip the sugary sip, and you'll find it easier to skip the snack. So, put together, fructose causes mitochondrial damage, oxidative stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, leptin resistance, and an increase in food cravings, which results in not only poorer brain function, but also structural brain damage and brain shrinkage. And all those things contribute to more rapid aging. Is that soft drink, that momentary buzz, worth all that damage? But wait, there's more. That's only the chain of events relating to fructose. What about the other half of the sugar molecule, glucose? As I said, glucose is different from fructose in that glucose provides fuel for our brain. Fructose drains brain cells of energy, while glucose supplies brain cells with energy, and that's a good thing. However, glucose in soft drinks is too much of a good thing, because that glut of glucose causes a spike in blood sugar. And whenever you hear the term blood sugar, it means blood glucose. Blood glucose is the more accurate term because you now know that sugar doesn't just refer to glucose. It also refers to other sugars like fructose and sucrose. But it's only glucose that we measure in our blood, so I'll use the term blood glucose from here on. And chronically elevated blood glucose, i.e. hyperglycemia, which results from consuming too much sugar, especially in sugary beverages, damages the tiny blood vessels supplying your brain, which reduces oxygen and nutrient delivery to your brain, which over time can kill brain cells. Excess glucose, like fructose, also causes neuroinflammation and oxidative stress, which you now know means there are too many unstable molecules called ROS, reactive oxygen species, floating around, and not enough protective antioxidants, like vitamin C, to neutralize the ROS and prevent cellular damage. Chronically elevated blood glucose levels also cause the brain to become less responsive to insulin, making it harder for brain cells to use glucose for energy. And the final nail in the coffin is that when we consume large amounts of glucose, as in Skull soft drinks, it triggers the conversion of glucose to fructose. So you get all the damaging effects of fructose as well. I'm exhausted just thinking about all the acts of vandalism perpetrated on our brain by soft drinks. Okay, let's take a breath. Let's pause. to be fair, I have been talking about excess fructose and excess glucose. So what does excess mean? How many soft drinks are too many? Is there a safe level of soft drink consumption? To answer that question, let's look at today's health headline. Today's health headline is soft drinks are the new cigarettes. I know in podcast number 5, I said that sitting was the new smoking, and it is, but equally so, soft drinks are the new cigarettes. Is there a safe level of cigarette smoking? No. Smoking just one cigarette a day increases your risk of having a heart attack or stroke. Researchers from the University College London analysed 141 studies that looked at the differential effects of smoking 1, 5 or 20 cigarettes a day. And smoking one cigarette was associated with a 48% increase in heart disease in men and a 57% increase in heart disease in women. The increased risk of a stroke was the same in men and women, about 30%. Smoking more than one cigarette a day increases the risk further, but the message is no level of cigarette smoking is safe. Cutting down is obviously a positive step, but the goal is to give up altogether. A similar scenario plays out for soft drinks. There is no safe level of soft drink consumption. The problem, however, is that there are no anti-soft drink campaigns. There are no public health initiatives to encourage people to quit soft drinks, to skip the sugary sip. Think about the cigarette timeline, and hopefully we will learn from history, and tackling soft drinks isn't going to take the time it took to tackle cigarettes. So, in 1602, more than 420 years ago, an early English essay suggested that tobacco might cause illnesses similar to those seen in chimney sweeps. But everyone ignored it. In the late 1700s, now that's nearly 200 years later, doctors in Germany and the US began reporting cancers of the lip in pipe smokers. But still no one did anything about it. In the 1920s, the first medical reports specifically linking smoking to lung cancer began to appear. But surprise, surprise, a lot of newspaper editors suppressed the information because they didn't want to lose the revenue they received from tobacco companies that advertised cigarettes in their newspapers. Then, horror of horrors, throughout the 1930s, even into the 1940s, tobacco companies tried to counter rising health concerns by using doctors to talk about their preferred cigarettes in advertising campaigns. More doctors smoke Camel was a major marketing triumph, and the company even conducted surveys to back their claims, which was then a tactic widely adopted by other brands. But surveys are not science. Surveys are personal opinions. And this was despite the fact that in 1939, an American surgeon, Dr. Alton Ochsner, he published research on the link between smoking and lung cancer. But again, the findings didn't reach a wide public audience, so people were still none the wiser about the harms of cigarettes. Finally, in the 1950s, extensive epidemiological studies from the UK and the US provided clear evidence that smoking was a major cause of lung cancer. And even though tobacco companies were aware of these findings internally, they continued to publicly deny them. In fact, in 1954, the tobacco companies released a frank statement to cigarette smokers denying the link to cancer and framing the issue as an open controversy. 3 years later, in 1957, US Surgeon General Leroy Burney officially declared the Public Health Service's position that evidence pointed to a causal relationship between smoking and lung cancer. 1950s. But it wasn't until 1964, another 7 years on, that the US Surgeon General's report officially concluded that cigarette smoking was definitely a cause of lung cancer in men and also a significant health hazard overall. Women didn't seem to be worth mentioning. But at least this garnered widespread media coverage and finally created broad public awareness. And over the next 10 years, cautionary labels were mandated for all cigarette packs, and anti-smoking ads began to air on TV. But in the early days, there were still cigarette ads, only that for every cigarette ad, there had to be an anti-smoking ad to compensate. Talk about mixed messages. It's a bit like the anti-gambling slogans. I've seen, that online wagering service providers are required to use and rotate in their advertising in Australia. Have you noticed that when there's an ad for some kind of betting, straight afterwards, there's a warning? Chances are you're about to lose. What's gambling really costing you? Imagine what you could be buying instead. I think they're really great slogans for gambling, but you know what? We could use them with soft drinks. How about this? Chances are you're about to lose some brain cells. What's that soft drink really costing you? Your health, your youth, your vitality, your energy. Imagine what you could be drinking instead. Refreshing, life-giving water. Anyway, back to cigarettes. Eventually, in 1971, cigarette ads were banned from TV and radio in the US, but it took Australia until 1975, 4 years, to do the same. And then print media bans came next. That didn't happen in Australia until 1990, another 15 years on. But things were moving in the right direction, thank goodness. But can you see how slowly this train is moving? But at least from then on, smoking bans in Australian public places started to roll out. The ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, for my non-Australian viewers and listeners, the ACT led the way by banning smoking in restaurants in 1994, which was gradually followed by comprehensive bans on enclosed public spaces across most states by 2007. And then there were extensions to outdoor dining areas from 2010. As a result, finally this is a good news story, Australians today are consuming about 92% less tobacco products per capita than at the height of consumption in 1970. The point I'm making is that it took a very, very long time, centuries in fact, for the harms of smoking to reach public awareness. The makers of cigarettes lied shamelessly for decades until they were no longer able to hide the evidence, and then it still took another 10 years before large-scale government-backed anti-smoking campaigns and meaningful regulations were established. And today we think, unbelievable that so many people used to smoke. Unbelievable that there was smoking permitted in aeroplanes. Where do sugary drinks, in particular soft drinks and energy drinks, fall within this timescale? I'd say we're at the same stage that cigarettes were in the 1950s. Because right now, extensive research from all around the world provides clear evidence that sugary drinks are a major cause of every chronic disease we currently suffer, especially type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, obesity, heart disease, depression, and dementia. And if you changed nothing in your life, same food, same exercise, same sleep patterns, but you just started drinking one small can of soft drink a day, in 12 months, you will have gained 6.5 to 7 kilograms, about 15 pounds of body fat, and you will have increased your risk of type 2 diabetes by 23%. But just like the tobacco companies, soft drink companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo totally deny culpability. They maintain that their beverages can be part of a balanced diet. They lobby against public health policies like taxing sugary drinks. They spend billions of dollars on sponsorships and marketing. And worst of all, they often target disadvantaged groups so that they create demand, and they associate their products with happiness and enjoyment. And they fund scientific research that manipulates the data so that soft drinks don't come out looking harmful. Let me give you an example. Drinking a sugar-sweetened soft drink raises blood pressure, uric acid, and triglyceride levels within 4 hours of ingestion. That fact is deliberately omitted because 24 hours later, blood tests return to normal. So that's the result that gets published. But if a person consumes sugary drinks every day, blood pressure, uric acid, and triglyceride levels stay elevated. And these are the first steps towards developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, gout, and Alzheimer's. However, soft drink companies choose to only report the effects of a single soft drink 24 hours after consumption in healthy athletic males in whom a soft drink is going to have a lesser effect than with you and me because their large muscles take in a lot of the sugar, thereby buffering its effect. But even athletic young men won't get away with drinking soft drinks year after year. Their drinking will eventually catch up with them. It'll just take longer than with mere mortals like you and me. So basically, research funded by soft drink companies doesn't report on the immediate and cumulative effects of their products because it'd make them look bad. They control information by controlling the scientists who do the research. And one of their guileful goals is to shift attention away from sugar and blame a lack of exercise as the primary cause of obesity. Now, of course, physical exercise is important, but you can't outrun Red Bull. It does not give you wings. It gives you a weight problem. Come to think of it, Red Bull does give you wings around your waist. And then soft drink manufacturers have the gall to deny the addictive properties of their products and blame the consumer for making poor dietary choices. And yet, behind closed doors, Coca-Cola executives don't speak in terms of customers. They actually use the language of addiction. People with a habit of 2 or more cans a day are referred to as heavy users. That's admitting that their product causes dependency. Are you or anyone you know a heavy user? Michael Moss is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, and he interviewed one of Coca-Cola's former presidents, Jeffrey Dunn, after Dunn had resigned. Why on earth would you resign as president of Coca-Cola in North and South America? Because after a trip to Brazil, where Dunn saw kids, and I'm quoting him now, kids were so unfairly lured, so helpless in the face of the company's tactics, so utterly vulnerable to the addictive powers of Coke, that he decided his company had gone too far, and he resigned. Jeffrey Dunn also admitted that rising rates of obesity were exactly in parallel with rising rates of sugary soft drink consumption. The data speaks for itself. And I highly recommend you read Michael Moss's 2 brilliant books, after you've read mine, of course. His books are Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us, that's one book. And then the second book, the next book was Hooked, How We Became Addicted to Processed Foods. Absolutely essential reading. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but cigarettes are still worse than soft drinks because of the passive smoking effect. Well, guess what? There's also a passive drinking effect. When we see others consuming soft drinks, we think, well, it must be okay. Safety in numbers. If everyone around you is sipping on sugary drinks, they can't be that bad. Yes, they can. Safety in numbers does not apply here. We're becoming sick in numbers. Please don't succumb to a false sense of security. Instead, you can be a powerful pebble in the pond of your sphere of influence. You know, when you drop a pebble in a pond, and the waves just spread out to the very far corners, edges of the pond. Well, when you stop drinking sugary beverages, other people might notice and ask why. And even if they don't immediately do the same, you'll have started a conversation and maybe just planted a seed. And we really, really need those seeds. Because soft drink companies have been so good at deceiving the entire world that for the vast majority of people, soft drinks still sparkle with innocence. They're woven into childhood memories, shared meals, holidays on the beach, celebratory high fives. Just as cigarettes were marketed as symbols of style, sophistication, and relaxation, soft drinks are all about fun, festivities, and friendship. But it's all just an illusion of harmless indulgence, because those bubbles deliver a brutal blow. Soft drinks are engineered to be consumed in excess. No one intends to become addicted to cigarettes. It starts with just one puff, and before you know it, you're hooked. No one intends to become addicted to soft drinks. It starts with one sip, and before you know it, you can't get through the afternoon without a can of corruptness. The other big problem with soft drinks is that they aren't simply beverages, they're replacements. Every time we reach for a Coke or Pepsi or Fanta, we're not reaching for water, tea, something that nourishes. And over the years, that displacement adds up. Energy crashes become normal. Constant cravings feel inevitable. Our baseline shifts because our mind and body have become conditioned to operating at a suboptimal level. We forget how it feels to be running on all cylinders because rundown becomes the new normal. And yes, it isn't just soft drinks alone that run us down. It's all ultra-processed foods, but that's a topic for another podcast. But I just want to reiterate, just like there's no safe level of cigarette smoking, there is no safe level of soft drink consumption. Just one more example. Within a few minutes of drinking one sugary soft drink, your teeth are coated with sugars. And bacteria in your mouth, especially Streptococcus mutans, quickly starts feeding on the sugar. As bacteria consume the sugar, they produce acids. Now, most soft drinks are already acidic, particularly colas, also energy drinks, citrus sodas. So you're getting a big whack of acids attacking your teeth. That acid starts to soften and demineralize enamel, which is the tooth's protective outer layer. Within 10 to 20 minutes, the pH in your mouth can drop below 5.5, so that's getting more acidic, which is the threshold where enamel actually begins to dissolve. And softened enamel means increased vulnerability to tooth decay and cavities. Now, fortunately, after about half an hour, your saliva kicks in and begins to neutralize the acids and remineralize your enamel. And this takes anything up to an hour, depending on how hydrated you are, the rate at which your saliva is flowing, and your overall dental health, which won't be good if you're a regular soft drink consumer. Because if you frequently sip soft drinks, the pH stays low, i.e. stays acidic, for longer, and that prevents recovery. So repeated exposure to soft drinks, especially sipping throughout the day, leads to permanent enamel erosion, cavities, tooth sensitivity, and a higher risk of gum inflammation. And gum inflammation is a whole other story, but just briefly, gum inflammation, the fancy name for which is periodontitis or periodontal disease. Gum inflammation significantly increases the risk of chronic conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, respiratory illnesses, rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's, and even pregnancy complications like gestational diabetes, premature birth, and low birth weight. And that's because chronic gum inflammation triggers a body-wide immune response. That causes systemic inflammation And that's going to affect other organs and systems beyond just our teeth and gums. Also, bacteria can spread from your mouth into your bloodstream and get carried far and wide throughout the body. And if you already have a pre-existing heart or lung condition, gum disease will make them worse and harder to manage. Not to mention that sugary drinks increase the risk of all those diseases even in the absence of gum disease. Can you see how soft drinks weave this enormous tangled web of wearisome health issues? Soft drinks aren't just a bullet to our brain. They're also a bullet to our body. In fact, they're more like machine gun fire. Fizzy drinks cause frazzled brains and frazzled bodies. And one more word of warning. Don't brush your teeth straight after drinking a sugary beverage. Why? Because remember, your enamel is temporarily softened. So brushing immediately after drinking can actually scratch the enamel and wear it down even more. Dentists, I have asked, they recommend that you wait at least half an hour, preferably an hour, after drinking something sugary before you brush your teeth. So what can you do to attenuate the attack on your teeth? Of course, the ideal scenario is to skip the sugary sip altogether, and I'll tackle that in a moment. But if you do drink sugary beverages, do these 5 things. 1, use a straw to reduce contact with your teeth. 2, if you don't have a straw, I don't believe I'm saying this, but scull it down quickly. Because if you sip the drink over a long period of time, your teeth are awash with sugar for a longer period of time. And you just want your teeth to be in contact with that sugar for as short a time as possible. 3, rinse your mouth with water after drinking. And of course, number 4, make brushing and flossing part of your twice daily routine and visit your dentist for a checkup every year. Okay. If you are ready to take the plunge, and I so hope you are, if you are ready to quit the Coke, pour out the Pepsi, forgo the Fanta, spurn the Sprite, cut out the cordial, jettison the juice, and renounce Red Bull, how do you go about it? Because for a lot of people, sugary drinks are an addiction, and they suffer physical and psychological withdrawal symptoms when they stop or even just cut back their intake. Look, the step-by-step process of quitting will be the subject of another podcast, but I will give you the first and most important step now, because if you nail this one step, you'll figure out the other steps for yourself. The first step to quitting sugary drinks is find your why, and you'll find a way. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche observed that he who has a powerful why can conquer any unknown how. Or in the words of Napoleon Hill, there is one quality that one must possess to win, and that is definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants and a burning desire to possess it. I can give you all the reasons in the world why quitting soft drinks is one of the best things you can do for your brain, your body, your energy levels, your mood, your overall health, your longevity, and even your sex life. Yes, too much sugar contributes to erectile dysfunction because it damages blood vessels and nerves crucial for erections. And soft drinks lower testosterone levels in both men and women, which can mean a lower libido. So add that to your list. But my point is, you need to really, really want to give up soft drinks. You need to have a compelling, motivating, lasting, life-enhancing, exciting, invigorating, unquenchable reason, pun intended, unquenchable, huh? For quitting soft drinks, or you won't succeed. Not if it's become an addiction and all your friends are drinking them and you enjoy them. Because when you truly want something, you don't need willpower. Want power is more powerful than willpower. Want power increases willpower because you're driven to succeed. When you're absolutely clear and passionate about your reasons for wanting to quit sugary drinks, you become unstoppable. Knowing your why is absolutely critical because it turns any challenges you encounter into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. So, right now, sit down and write down your personal empowering reasons for wanting to renounce all sugary soft drinks, energy drinks, sports drinks, cordials, fruit drinks, fruit juices, sweetened tea, syrupy coffees. Is there any sugary beverage I haven't thought of? My point. Find your why and you'll find your way. So what's missing from modern medicine in this context? What's missing from modern medicine is the guts to stand up to the soft drink industry and the astuteness to learn from them. Much like cigarettes decades ago, soft drinks have enjoyed decades of social acceptance while contributing to all chronic diseases. This has to stop. And while, yes, there are scientists and public health advocates arguing that sugary drinks warrant similar regulation to cigarettes, their voices just aren't loud enough. Why isn't what I'm saying taught in every school in every country in the world? Why aren't soft drink vending machines banned from educational institutions, banned from workplaces, and banned from fitness centres? Like if there were cigarette vending machines in schools and gyms, you'd think it was outrageous. Why aren't there soft drink public education campaigns, warning labels, taxes, stricter marketing controls, especially towards young people? Given the overwhelming strength of accumulating evidence, sugar-sweetened drinks should be labelled as a public health hazard, not a dietary choice. At least allow people to make an informed choice, like cigarette smokers. They know that they are inhaling toxins, but most people don't think they're consuming toxins when they take that sugary sip. The way our medical system works is that we're passively sitting back and letting people fall off a cliff and then trying to patch them up after they fall. Drinking soft drinks and eating ultra-processed foods, which I'll cover in future podcasts, but drinking and eating junk, especially high amounts of sugar, is akin to falling off a cliff. Why not stop people falling off the cliff in the first place? Why not build railings, barriers? Why not put up signs warning people of the dangers of getting too close to the edge so they don't fall? Then we wouldn't have to build so many hospitals at the bottom of the cliff to deal with the broken bodies. This is where we need to look at soft drink companies and use their tactics to our own advantage. Coca-Cola are marketing geniuses. I bow down to their marketing prowess. They have brainwashed the entire world into drinking brown bubbles. Whereas doctors have made healthy choices sound like a boring chore. Being healthy doesn't equate to being boring. We've just been indoctrinated into thinking it does. Coke, McDonald's, and other junk food giants have used state-of-the-art psychological manipulation to turn unhealthy habits into a Disneyland parade, while making healthy habits feel like a tax return. McDonald's also deserves its own shrine in the Museum of Marketing Miracles. Imagine walking into a board meeting and saying, "All right, team, here's our strategy. We're going to sell soggy potatoes, floppy buns, and insipid burgers with zero nutritional value, and we're going to convince people that they're loving it." And they did it. They did it spectacularly. Despite the food having little more taste than its packaging, McDonald's has managed to brand itself as comfort, happiness, childhood nostalgia, Olympic-level athleticism. Seriously, they sponsored the Olympics for decades. McDonald's is a place where dreams come true, and McDonald's is a well-earned reward. Well, I guess some people might regard spending time off work in hospital for a heart attack as a reward. McDonald's and Coca-Cola are not in the business of selling food and beverages. They're in the business of selling feelings. They're in the business of selling emotions connected to good times. McDonald's are in the business of selling nostalgia, happy memories with family and friends. Coca-Cola is in the business of selling fun and excitement and living life to the full. The paradox is that McDonald's and Coca-Cola rob us of the very things they're selling us on because they make us sick. And when we're sick, or even just tired and run down, which is how soft drinks and junk food make us feel in the long run, we are not having fun with family and friends. We are not living life to the full. And the biggest irony of all is that junk food and soft drink companies have made addiction look like freedom. They have marketed themselves as the exact opposite of what they really are. Isn't that incredible? This is so impressive. Let's break down how they did it. How they brainwashed us into perceiving junk as joy, how they turned toxins into treats, and how they conditioned us to equate self-care with a chemical-flavoured cupcake that will spike your insulin to the stratosphere. The first stage occurred in childhood. What foods did your parents or grandparents or teachers give you as a reward? You scraped your knee. Here's some broccoli. I don't think so. More like, here's a lolly. You're a good girl today, so you can have an ice cream. Because you ate all the vegetables on your plate, you're allowed to have dessert. What does that teach us? It tells us that vegetables are not intrinsically rewarding, which in reality they are, but instead that vegetables are something we had to be bribed to eat. Were you ever told, you did so well in your test today, here's some spinach? On top of that, you have food and drink ads turning unhealthy products into emotional symbols. All their products are attached to fun, celebration, relaxation, connection, while healthy food gets attached to responsibility, adulthood, chores, taxes, and sensible shoes. Remember the Mars slogan? A Mars a day helps you work, rest and play. No, it doesn't. A Mars a day blasts your brain cells away. And then we have the normalization of unhealthy habits because everyone everywhere is doing it. Drinking 3 cans of soda a day is normal, while declining a donut is sad. That blows my mind. When I see someone drinking can after can of soda, I feel sad. Healthy choices are seen as missing out on life instead of gaining life. If you make a healthy food choice and it makes someone else feel guilty or uncomfortable, they'll try to cajole you into their way of eating. Oh, come on, you don't need to be on a diet. Go on, enjoy yourself. Why don't you live it up a little? You deserve a treat. It takes a lot of confidence to say, yes, you're right, I do deserve a treat. That's why I'm choosing the fennel over the fries. So what can we do about this? How can we start rebranding healthy choices as fun choices, as the choices we want to make rather than should make? Let's just play with some Coca-Cola slogans and let's turn them into ads for broccoli. Do you remember the slogan, Coke is it? Well, let's change it to broccoli is it. How about Coke adds life? Broccoli adds life, which it genuinely does, while Coke does not. Another campaign that Coke had, taste the feeling. With broccoli, it could be taste the healing. The Coke side of life, the broccoli side of life. And their latest slogan, who will you share a Coke with? Who will you share broccoli with? I know you probably think it sounds ridiculous, but branding broccoli as a buzz is in reality far less ridiculous than branding brown bubbly water as a buzz. If broccoli was marketed like Coca-Cola, everyone would be eating it because we wouldn't just be eating bland steamed broccoli. We would be exchanging recipes about broccoli. People would be coming up, if we're marketing broccoli, we'd be coming up with creative things to do with the broccoli in terms of, how to make it more tasty, what other foods can we combine it with, how to present it in a really interesting way. The minute we start marketing broccoli as fun, exciting, celebratory, absolutely packed with flavour, we would find the most amazing ads to go with it, and we would actually start enjoying broccoli more than we could ever imagine. So let's start telling ourselves every meal is an opportunity to heal, and what's nutritious is delicious. Now, before I get to today's weather report, I just want to make it clear that I'm not a vengeful person. I do not want to put the soft drink industry out of business. All I'd like soft drink companies to do is to rebrand as cleaning products, insect repellents, and composting agents, because their acidity and carbonation help break down lots of different substances like rust, grease, and organic matter, and that gives them a huge list of really useful things that you can do with them. So if you have a fridge full of soft drinks and you've decided to quit drinking them, they won't go to waste. Put them in your laundry. And I'll give you just a few great uses for them, especially Coca-Cola. So if you have mouldy wooden surfaces, spill some Coke onto them, wait for 30 seconds, rinse it off, and then wipe away the mould. Don't leave the Coke on for too long because the soft drink could start to erode the wood. Pour Coke into your toilet bowl and leave it for an hour or longer so it dissolves the grime and lime, and you'll then be able to scrub it off with a brush much more easily. Soak your rusty tools in a bucket of Coke overnight and then scrub off the rust the next morning. You can remove oil stains. You can remove chewing gum. Like with chewing gum, whatever the gum is attached to, soak it in Coke for a few minutes and then the gum will just slip off. You can do it with your hair as well. Soak your hair in Coke and then you can pull the gum out. Not that I'm suggesting you're getting gum in your hair every day, but just in case. You can speed up your composting. If you add a soft drink, the acid will help break down the organic matter and then the sugar will attract bacteria and the whole thing will work much better. And if you or your dog ever encounter a skunk, if you can't get rid of the smell, sure enough, the phosphoric acid in Coke will break down the smelly sulfuric compounds produced by the skunk and eliminate the odour. So you might need to soak your clothes and your pets several times for it to completely remove all the stench. And there are plenty of other ways that soft drinks can be very useful in your home and garden.
Hello, I'm Phoebe from Wollongong. Can you please tell me whether fruit juice is healthy or not? I keep seeing contradictory messages about fruit juice. One minute I'm told to go on a juice cleanse and the next minute I hear that fruit juice has too much sugar and I shouldn't drink it at all. Also, can you tell me whether squeezing my own fruit at home is healthier than buying ready-made juice from the grocery store? Finally, please tell me whether using a blender or NutriBullet to make a smoothie is healthier than simply drinking juice.
Thank you, Phoebe. They're all such great questions and they fit perfectly with the rest of today's podcast. I agree that few nutrition topics create as much confusion as fruit juice. One day you hear it's a liquid superfood, packed with phytonutrients, antioxidants, vitamins and minerals, and the next day you hear warning signs that fruit juice is pure sugar, barely different from soft drinks. Then you add juice cleansers into the mix, and then the rise of high-powered blenders like the NutriBullet, which claims that its high-powered motor and unique extractor blade break down the cell walls of fibrous plants, including stems, seeds and skins, to release and optimise the absorption of vitamins and minerals. And most people have no idea what to believe. So, is fruit juice healthy or not? The short answer is fruit juice does contain phytonutrients, antioxidants, vitamins and minerals. Phytonutrients, they're natural health-promoting compounds produced by plants. And antioxidants protect your body's cells from damage caused by harmful molecules called free radicals. Think of antioxidants as your body's security team that neutralises unstable damaging atoms, preventing what's known as oxidative stress, which is analogous to rust and leads to aging and disease. And I wanted to explain what antioxidants were and oxidative stress is, because you'll hear a lot of that everywhere in the media, and I talk about it a lot in this podcast. So, it's good that fruit contains these compounds. However, the nutrients in juice do not compensate for the big hit of sugar it delivers, because fruit juice is essentially liquid sugar. And you can get all those nutrients from whole fruit and vegetables without the massive sugar hit. Now, fruit juice is clearly better than consuming artificially coloured and flavoured carbonated drinks, but you're still getting those extremely high doses of sugar. There's pretty much the same amount of sugar in a juice as a soft drink of the same quantity. How many oranges would you eat in one sitting? Probably no more than one. How many oranges go into making one small glass of juice? A minimum of 4. You'd never eat 4 oranges at a time, but you can drink 4 oranges or 4 apples worth of sugar in 20 seconds. On the flip side, people argue you're getting 4 times the vitamins and antioxidants. But do you really need 4 times the vitamins in one hit? Most of the time, if you're eating whole, real, unprocessed food, you don't need mega doses of vitamins. Consider how our ancestors consumed fruit. Firstly, they foraged fruit when it was in season, i.e. it was only available at limited times in the year and in limited quantities. Today, in contrast, we have a limitless supply of fruit 24/7 as liquid sugar. Also in the past, many fruits were smaller, they were much less sweet and more bitter, acidic and fibrous. But over thousands of years, and especially in the last century, selective breeding and modern agricultural techniques have heavily modified fruits to be larger, less fibrous, more palatable and considerably higher in sugar. So the confusion about fruit juice comes from the fact that fruit juice is extracted from a natural-seeming plant food, which isn't as natural as it once was, but it's probably as natural a food as you'll get today. Fruit juice does contain healthy nutrients, but it also delivers high amounts of sugar. You'll recall from what I said earlier, eating real, whole fruit, peel and all, is very different to drinking fruit. Because in whole fruit, the sugar is packaged inside plant cells surrounded by fibre. And when you bite into an apple, the fibre slows down how fast the sugars reach your bloodstream. Fibre also fills you up, which means you stop eating fairly quickly. But when you turn fruit into juice, the machine nonetheless pulverizes the fibre, so it loses the capacity to act as a physical barrier to prevent the rapid absorption of the sugar. So, in answer to your smoothie versus juice question, retaining the peel and the fibre, even in pulverized form, will provide you with a higher dose of phytonutrients, will keep you fuller for longer. It'll feed your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. You'll get a smaller blood sugar spike. You'll get a steadier supply of energy, but smoothies can still be very high calorie and very high sugar. The other plus with a smoothie is that you tend to use fewer fruits. For example, a juice might require 4 apples, while a smoothie would more likely use only, say, 1 apple, a couple of berries, a protein like milk, yogurt or chia seeds, and often a vegetable or 2, which contain a lot less sugar than fruit. So a smoothie is more like a food than a drink. I would never consider a smoothie a drink. It's a food. So, and also I see smoothies and fruit juices as 2 very different entities. Think fruit juice is a drink, a smoothie is a meal. And the health of a smoothie depends very much on what you put into it. If you add honey or any kind of syrup, you're adding sugar. If you add protein powders, they can actually include other ingredients like sugars, like artificial flavourings, thickeners. And in fact, many protein powders have also been found to contain pesticides, heavy metals, lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and some have been found to contain BPA, which stands for bisphenol A, and it's used to make plastic. And you really don't want to be consuming any of those. So depending on who you speak to about fruit juice, you get completely different messages. If someone wants high-dose vitamins and antioxidants, they'll tell you fruit juice is fabulous. If they're worried about the sugar, they'll tell you that fruit juice is basically the same as a soft drink, because once it enters your blood, your body doesn't differentiate between the sugar from juice and the sugar from a soft drink. And repeated glucose spikes, even from natural foods, can contribute over the years to insulin resistance, i.e. pre-diabetes, fatty liver disease, high blood pressure, heart disease, and other chronic illnesses. The other downside of fruit juice is that it doesn't satisfy hunger. Liquid calories don't trigger fullness hormones the way whole fruit does. So you might drink, say, 150 to 300 calories of juice and still feel hungry, because appetite control is going to depend on chewing, on fibre stretching your stomach, and on the release of satiety hormones such as leptin. There's no chewing and there's no fibre stretching your stomach when you drink juice, so that's 2 signals you're not getting that should be telling you to stop consuming calories. Meanwhile, leptin is a hormone produced by your fat cells that tells your brain when you're full and reduces your urge to eat. Leptin also increases your energy expenditure. It makes you want to move. So it's great at ensuring we maintain a healthy body weight. And although fruit juice stimulates leptin release, fructose contributes to your brain becoming leptin resistant. That means your body is producing leptin, but your brain doesn't register the signal that you're full, which can lead to overeating and potential weight gain. And the worst way to consume juice is to have it on an empty stomach, because at least if you consume juice with a meal, the food will slow down your absorption of the sugar to some extent. And clearly, vegetable juices contain much less sugar than fruit juices, but most people add some form of sweetness to their juice, even if it's mainly vegetables. Okay, so what's the deal with juice cleansers? Juice cleansers, i.e. a period of consuming only fruit and vegetable juices, are an example of pseudoscience combined with marketing genius. Humans have always loved the idea of purification. And when the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s brought with it urbanisation, pollution, and processed food, people started to legitimately worry about what was entering their bodies. Unfortunately, however, this spawned the era of a nonsensical 19th century theory known as auto-intoxication. And this theory proposed that waste build-up in your colon poisoned the body from the inside. Where the waste came from and what it actually was, no one ever mentioned. Was it air pollution? In which case, it would be your lungs that dealt with it. Was it pesticides? If so, how did they build up in the colon? No one had any answers to these questions, but the concept sounded plausible, and despite having no scientific basis, it became wildly influential. And it went on to give us colon cleansers, purgatives, and the idea that the body accumulates these unnamed toxins, hence the need to detoxify. But here's the true story of detoxification. Detoxification is handled continuously by our liver, kidneys, gastrointestinal tract, skin, and lungs. They are all doing some form of detoxification at one time or another pretty continuously. As an example, our liver uses enzymes to convert harmful drugs, alcohol, and other toxins to intermediate compounds, which are then combined with other substances to make them water-soluble so they can be excreted from our body through urine or bile. The liver does not need special detox diets or supplements or juices to function. Same with any other detox system in our body. It's happening all the time. Detoxification is an inbuilt feature of the human body. But this fact did not stop Dr. Max Gerson, a German-born American physician, inventing a pseudoscientific diet-based treatment for cancer in 1920, and it came to be known as Gerson therapy. And Gerson therapy involved a plant-based diet with up to 13 juices a day, plus coffee enemas, ozone enemas, yes, that's exactly what it sounds like, dietary supplements, and raw calf liver extract. The raw calf liver was eventually taken out of the equation in the 1980s because patients were landing in hospital with serious bacterial infections from consuming the raw calf liver. And when the National Cancer Institute assessed the scientific validity of Gerson therapy, they concluded that it was not only ineffective, but also dangerous, and several people died as a result of Gerson's treatment. Now, Gerson therapy obviously went beyond juice cleanses, but it seems to be where juice entered the health narrative as being medicinal and started to gather some real momentum. And to push things further along, in 1935, a health enthusiast called Norman W. Walker invented the Norwalk hydraulic press juicer. And this was a really fancy, powerful machine designed to extract juice from raw fruits and vegetables while preserving enzymes and nutrients, because Mr. Walker believed that raw juice was not merely food, but concentrated life force. I mean, arguably any real food could be considered life force because it contributes to keeping us alive, but a salad or a stew or a piece of grilled fish could equally be regarded as life force. However, Mr. Walker was a better marketer than people who ate salads and stews, so he was really successful in popularising the idea that raw, fresh-pressed juice was absolutely crucial for health. And even though his juicer was neither cheap nor simple to use, it became iconic in natural health circles. And then, in 1941, another self-taught health advocate, Stanley Burroughs, introduced what was known as the Master Cleanse. It was a simple recipe: lemon juice, maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and water. Drink this mixture exclusively for several days, sometimes even weeks, along with herbal laxative tea, and it will detoxify your body, dissolve mucus, and eliminate disease. Or so Mr. Burroughs claimed. And I think what people most love about a juice cleanse like this is that it gives a sense of agency and renewal. It's like really emotionally satisfying. The subtext that comes with a juice cleanse is that it promises control in a chaotic world, purity in a polluted environment, redemption after indulgence in a slow biological system. And humans crave a symbolic fresh start, and a juice cleanse fits the bill perfectly. It's a ritualized reset, and the whole idea of it just feels fabulous. You've removed processed and packaged foods from your diet. You're consuming fewer calories, so you feel lighter, cleaner, virtuous. And a cleanse can serve as a behavioural turning point. It's an opportunity to just pause and reflect on our eating habits. I've seen a lot of people who are actually on quite a high when they just drink juice for a few days, in part because of the belief that they're doing something really positive for themselves. And that belief alone can genuinely boost our health. I'll talk about how our beliefs drive our biology in future podcasts, because our beliefs are way more powerful than we realise. So it's little wonder that green juice has become aspirational, especially when it's marketed by slim young women on Instagram. So what's good about a juice cleanse is that you're being proactive. You're taking responsibility for your health, which you'll remember is the first step in true medicines. TR stands for take responsibility. You believe you're doing something positive for your health and you've stopped eating rubbish. Well, that's going to bring enormous health benefits just on its own, regardless of whatever fruit and vegetables you're putting in your juice. So I tell people, look, if you want a symbolic reset and you don't have insulin resistance or diabetes, then maybe the psychological benefits of a juice cleanse for a day or two might be what you need to kickstart a healthier way of eating. Personally, I'd just go on a water fast for a few days. Obviously, that's not as much fun, and it doesn't carry the same aura as a juice cleanse. And it also doesn't give you the opportunity to discuss exactly what you should put into your juice and whether maybe you should include this newly discovered supposed superfood ingredient. So it doesn't have all that ritual around it. But I believe if you want to reset, maybe just water for 24 hours, that gives you enough time to reflect, think about your habits, and start afresh. And your last question, Phoebe, was whether homemade freshly squeezed juice was healthier than store-bought juice. Usually, yes, but not always as much as we think. If you squeeze your juice at home and drink it straight away, yes, it does contain more micronutrients because vitamin C degrades in bottles. It also won't have any preservatives, and obviously it's fresher. Whereas store-bought juices, depending on the brand, they're often pasteurised, which further lowers their vitamin C content. They tend to be filtered more heavily, so they contain less pulp and less fibre. Sometimes they're made from concentrate, and they can include flavourings or additives. Having said that, of course, you can buy 100% juices with no additives that retain the pulp, but you have to read the labels, the ingredient list on the back carefully. So, to conclude, I personally don't recommend juices, smoothies, juice cleansers, because they really are all liquid sugar to one degree or another. And I can get all the nutrients they contain from a diet rich in whole, real, home-cooked food. Juices and smoothies are definitely better than carbonated soft drinks, sports drinks, energy drinks, cordials, or any of the other types of sugary drinks I spoke about at the start of this podcast. Please note that this podcast is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice and is not intended to provide specific guidance for any particular situation. The use of this information is at the viewer and listener's own risk and is not a substitute for consulting a healthcare provider.